Let's begin today's wonderful session with our esteemed guest, Gadi Pollock. We are so honored, Anita and I are, to have this rare opportunity because Gadi has been a longtime Vistage chair, successful one in Houston, but he's also a native of Israel, a veteran of the IDF, and I've always enjoyed coming to his groups. And I've spoken for 1,800 Vistage groups around the world in 18 years, but I got to tell you, the most special meetings are the ones with Gadi because of our, relationship because of Israel. They're just special. Nothing else compares with them. And so, Gadi, we welcome you to our chair group in Israel. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, boss. It's a pleasure to be here.
And so, Gadi, before we let everybody ask you some questions, can you just give us a little bit about your background, your history? You were born in Israel. Can you just go through a little bit of your history, if you would?
Sure. So I was born in Israel, in Kfar Darom, and when I was 2, my family moved to Montreal and Toronto. And so I grew up in Canada. When I was 18, I moved back to Israel. I enlisted in the Army in Shiryon in the Hester program. And so I served from 70 to 74. And I fought in the war, and I didn't think it affected me much. And I got married, and I worked at Bank Abinlaumi Rishon for a while. Then I worked for Adipaz. I was VP of sales in Yerushalayim. And then I left in 1982. One of my customers in the jewelry business in Houston hired me as his VP of sales. So I came to work here. And then when in 86, when oil went to $8 a barrel and every home on my block was up for sale, I started my own business. And eventually I decided that the jewelry business was not going to do it. And so I started an insurance practice for about 15 years. And I had a successful practice. And then one day I decided I had to do something else, but I didn't know what it was and I didn't know why. And so I followed my feet. I enjoyed facilitating meetings. I enjoyed having one-to-ones with people. And I did that, and people told me, you could get paid for doing this. And they introduced me to Vistage, and I turned them down twice. And finally, somebody sat me down and said, I was in a Vistage group and a member died. And the other members helped his wife run the business till it could be sold. I said, that's what I want. I want that I think the term is gibush, that sense of cohesion and friendship that I'd had in the Army and was missing from my life. And so I went to training in 2006. I launched in 2007. And I had this feeling somehow that what I was doing about leadership was related to my Mahat in the 73 war. See, Amnon Eshkol, he ended his career Tataluf. He was Mfaked Nachal. I was in his seventh in the war, and I reconnected with him. And I had a series of conversations with him over 10 years. I went to Israel every year and I talked to him, and he started telling me about things that I had no memory of and that I didn't want to believe. And he would tell me about myself and what I was good at. And to make a long story short, he convinced me that I should get checked out for combat PTSD. So 5 years ago, I started doing therapy on combat-related PTSD. And so I have been through profound healing. And I developed a system over 6,000 hours of coaching members. And through my work with Amnon, what I recognized that Amnon was doing, he was telling me my leadership strengths and powers. And as I started coaching my members, I recognized the same pattern, that they had some things they were really good at, but they had no awareness of it. And so I have developed a system that I call the 5 core leadership powers, which was taught to me by Amnon, which was really seeing that if you asked successful CEOs or leaders of any sort, how'd you get to be successful? How'd you get to be running this business? what are you doing different than other people? They would say things like, well, I was a great visionary, or I was analytical, or I was a people person, or I bonded well with people, or I had insight into people, or I could organize, or I could strategic, I was a visionary, lots of things, lots of different things. They could tell you one or two things that made them really successful. And in working with them, I could see that they had other skills that they were unaware of. And oftentimes when I asked them about these skills that they were unaware of, they could relate it to a pain or a trauma in the past. So my system basically says that great leadership, the kind of great leadership that won the battle of October 14th, 1973 on the Suez Canal, that was particular in my therapy. What I really discovered was that the call to leadership that I felt was rooted in that battle. As you may know, for those of you who may have lived through the war or not, it was the largest tank battle in history since the Battle of Kursk. And really it was about a massive Egyptian attack with heavy artillery. And to make a long story short, Amnon, there was a battalion of T-62s that was about to outflank us. Amnon was a Samchat. The Machat did not answer the radio. Amnon took a platoon of three tanks plus his, and defeated that enemy, and then rescued everybody. All the other tanks were hit. That event changed my life. And actually, Boaz, you don't know this, but last week, I was able to listen to a recording of the battle in which Amnon actually says, today we made history. And what that told me was that, because the story of the war was really a story of abandonment. The national military, we were abandoned. The soldiers were abandoned to our fate. We were abandoned to fate in the battle. And personally, I was abandoned growing up. And the lesson I got from that was that with great leadership, you can write your own history. You don't have to be subject to your prior history of abandonment. And so that's what I teach. It's a very condensed version of a very long story. And I've discovered that there's a lot of leaders with undiagnosed trauma that is actually running their life in the present, and what's holding them back in the present. Many of their challenges are related to that. So I have an expertise in this. I've researched over 200 books. I've started giving talks on the story of the battle, and then I invite others to tell their own stories, and we use it as a bonding exercise for many of my executive teams. In a nutshell, that's my story.
Gadi, that's amazing. Now tell us, you have a family, you have kids?
Yes, I have 4 children. Shoshana lives in New York. Naomi lives in Boston with 5 children. Ilana she'll be having her 4th child today. My son Dovi works in Mizrach Yerushalayim in Bitachon, and those are my kids.
Well, we're honored that you're spending time with us, especially because a grandchild is coming. I think we would have taken second fiddle to that anytime. And one of your daughter's names, that was my sister's name, Naomi, which Americans don't know how to pronounce it correctly. It's Nomi. And how many groups do you have, Gadi, and how many members in your Vistage groups?
I have 3 groups. I did have at a peak, I went through this whole thing with the PTSD, and I was running at my peak 4 groups with about 60 members. I've scaled it back. I've got 3 groups with about 35 to 40 members. I do a lot of private coaching. I've developed an expertise in crisis management and dispute resolution, like when there are conflicts on family members, shareholders, really difficult, the kind of conflicts nobody will touch with a 10-foot pole. That's where this expertise and my understanding of something called the polyvagal theory, understanding of the human nervous system, and how you can be that.
Yeah, well, we'd like to go around and have everybody ask you questions. I'd like to start with Anita. Anita, do you have any questions for Gadi about Vistage and Israel and so forth?
Yeah, so there are two basically different opinions. It's for the time that we're living in, with the economy and everything that is going on right now with the COVID-19. We need to overcome challenges that we didn't have before when everything was okay. How do you experience like recruiting members, convincing CEOs to join, see the value? How do you actually explain nowadays to CEOs why it's more important than ever to join to the peer advisory group? What is the added value?
Sure. So, so there's a shift. One of the things I'd learned is to shift from telling or describing the value to having them experience it. And what I do with all new candidates is I have a coaching session with them and I help them solve a problem. And then they have the experience of having advanced themselves, usually something they're stuck with or don't know what to do or think they can't do anything about it, and start to get a sense of movement forward.
And as part of this, Gotti, the process that's taught in Share Academy about how to resolve issues, is that the process you use with a potential member?
The process, so the issue processing that's taught in Share Academy, which in my opinion is the heart and soul of the Vistage group experience, like how to process issues. I would urge you all to learn it, to study it, to become experts at it, understand that your members will resist it, that there's always going to be somebody, a jackass, a smart ass in any group dynamics. There's going to be somebody who thinks he knows everything and wants to tell the answer right away. You cannot let that happen. You cannot let anybody else dominate the group. The group is about everybody. And in my groups, everybody knows they will be called upon. Everybody knows they're going to ask questions. It's your job as the chair. So that, as an aside to Boz's question, mastering that is a profound experience for most people. Once they feel that they have moved beyond a problem that has perplexed them, that has vexed them, that is causing them physical anxiety, that's where the transition is made. What I have developed is it's a combination of selection interview that I've developed on my own. And it's a combination of things I've learned for various chairs and best practices that really, it takes control of the interview. Because when you're telling or selling, what's happening is you're putting yourself into their mind, in the bucket of their mind as a salesperson. And what they're coming up with is they're treating you like that. And if you want to be a chair, you can't be less than them like a salesperson, because that's everybody in their life is trying to sell them something. You have to be their peer. You have to be somebody who's run a company, who's had experience, who's sat in their seat. You have to talk to them from that perspective, and you have to challenge them and be aggressive with them and take control of the interview. Otherwise, they're going to take control of it and you'll chase them for the next 20 years. So if you're inclined that way.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and Gotti, I've been at some of the issue processing sessions with groups, and the natural inclination is to want to tell people things, but the process the chair really holds on to, as I've seen you do, is so valuable. You know, no judgments, there's a certain process, and everybody will learn that in Chair Academy. I'd like to go to James because he's going to be doing some training shortly for Worldwide Sandler. We've got so many champions on this call, so he may have to leave us a little early for that. But James, any question for Gotti? And then we'll go to Jackie.
To be honest, not really. Just wondering if you know my colleagues from Houston, Troy, and there are a few out there. But
Yes, no, I know Troy, and I know Brad Fryer as well.
Oh, okay, there you go. Okay, yeah. Well, send them my regards. But yeah, I don't really have any questions. I think what I would like to ask you specifically, is there a specific niche within the type of CEOs that you're able to recruit? I mean, there's something, do you find a certain type that you are able to communicate more effectively with on recruiting them? And then are there the types that you feel more comfortable coaching? Just kind of.
Sure. So that's a great question. And I think it really points to the fact that I think the key to my success as a chair over the years was really identifying my own style, my own coaching style, my own history, and therefore the type of people that I'm most likely to bond with and connect with. And so, interestingly, so there's most of my, and I would say I still have one member who's an original member from 13 years ago. There are many people who stayed for 8 or 9 years and then retired. But I would say the willingness to be introspective in my groups, right? Oftentimes, the culture of the group is going to be a function of the culture of the personality of the chair. So whatever your personality is, those are the people you're going to attract. And recognize we're not going to attract everybody. And the best thing is to really work collaboratively as a team and identify this based on my personality, my experience, this is going to be the best chair for me. So for me, it's people who have a history of some sort of trauma in their background, people who are international and in a diverse background. And I think people who are willing to be introspective, and also to whom, for me, leadership is not a matter of status or prestige. For many people, it is. It's the schools you went to, the vacations you go, the homes you own. For many people, that's what leadership is. That's not what it was for me. So the people in my group have that personality profile over time. Is that helpful, James?
Extremely helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. All right, Jackie, and then we'll go to Yagev. Jackie, a question for Gadi.
Yeah, two questions. Gadi, first question, what are you still doing in the States? When are you coming back to Israel?
Okay, so this is the voice of my mother, right? My parents live in Yerushalayim. My mother stopped asking that question about 10 years ago. So thank you for that, for not giving up.
The other question, sorry, yeah, sorry, my kids are just interrupting there. Has there been a moment when you're interviewing potential candidates that you've said, oh, that's it, and then that has been the defining moment when you know that they're suited to the group or not suited to the group?
So I actually developed, through my own coaching, I developed 6 criteria that really work for me. And one of the things I do is I tell the candidates at the beginning that it's a selection process, it's mutual. I'm selecting them, they're selecting me. If you go into selling, you move into desperation, and that's not a good place to be. And I know that at the beginning, like generally speaking, when you're starting, whether insurance practice or Vistage practice, like anybody who moves is a candidate, right? So we will take in people often at the beginning process that maybe are not ideal. So I think what's really important is I tell them ahead of time, I have 6 criteria. I don't tell them what they are. And what that does, that subtly shifts the pressure. So it puts it on them, and it takes their competitiveness, because these people are, I see Shimshon is nodding. So it takes their competitive nature, and they start trying to please me rather than trying to put me down as a salesperson. So, and then I go through it, and I see, and I tell them the minimum to be accepted in the group is you've got to hit 4 out of 6. Right. And 5s and 6s are better. So that's really powerful.
And what are your criteria?
They're different for everybody, right? You have to develop your own based on them. For me, some of them were the person has to have a key goal. Mm-hmm. They have to have something that's really important to them, because they're going to have to take a day of the month, and they're going to hate doing that, because and typically the business size business, they are still a big part of the business, and it's hard for them to pull themselves away. And at 4 p.m. the day before the meeting, everybody's going to say, oh crap, I got a meeting tomorrow. What am I going to do? And so they really need that key goal, something that's really important that they want to learn, something that they're stuck. For my, one of my criteria was I had to know what their proficiency was. Like, what are they really good at? How did you get to be a leader? If they can identify that. Then the third criteria for me was they had to be able to take that and translate that into an additional area and prove it. They also had to be part of the community in some way. So if you look, some of those criteria, they're based on my own background, and they're really the story of the war, is how we run the war. So it took me like maybe 6 months to develop those, and they came from my own background. But that told me that was fit for me. Does that answer your question, Jack?
It does indeed. Thank you, Gadi.
Yeah, Gadi, any more of those points? You said you have to have a key goal, to know their proficiency, to pay back to the community. What were some of the others, just so we'll know?
Overcome adversity.
Overcome adversity.
And they have to be part of the community in some way. I know I'm missing one.
That's okay, but these are things that you have lined up that are important to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. How many of you, by a show of hands, would agree that is worth a fortune right there? I have 6 criteria for membership, and it takes a minimum of 4 for you to be part of the group. Who would agree that's huge? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, and not tell what they are. I think it's so cool. I love it. I just love it. Okay, and Yageb, and then Amir.
Hi, Gadi. I apologize. I was late, so I didn't get the first few minutes of your presentation.
And we're recording, Yageb, so you'll get it.
Yeah, I listened to the recording. What was not clear to me is how the story about your Mahat connects to the other aspects that you mentioned later on. If you can clarify, I understand that the connecting issue is leadership, but if you could explain a little bit more on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I was in the insurance business and I stopped selling insurance. I didn't know why. I just had this call from inside. I've got to do something else. I didn't know what it was. I somehow it was connected to Amnon Eshkol. That's what I knew 14, 15 years ago. That's why I stopped selling insurance. I spent a year of my life just facilitating meetings and coaching people because I enjoyed it, which led me to Vistage, which led me back to Amnon, which led me back to a series of conversations over 10 years in which we got to the battle of October 14th, in which I saw that great leadership could make history and overcome our own history. And that became the driving force in my life to identify great leadership and work with great leaders and teach great leaders, because during combat, it's a matter of life and death. And so really our brain's job is survival. Whatever our brain identifies as survival, it assigns the highest priority to. My brain assigned survival to great leadership because that was my actual experience. I only was alive because of his great leadership. And so that laid its foundations on October 1473 and led me 30 years later to Vistage. Does that explain it?
Yeah, much better now. Clear. Thanks.
Wow, thank you. Amir, and then Arnon.
גדי, do you speak Hebrew, גדי?
כן, אני מדבר גם עברית.
איזה חטיבה זאת הייתה?
164.
The reason
אתה
I'm
נראה
asking,
בגיל שהיית במלחמה.
no, the reason my brother was in that, and actually my brother, I believe, was there too. He was first at חטיבה 7 בגולן,
Yeah.
ואז לקחו אותו מבית הבראה באשקלון, ולקחו טנקיסטים, כל טנקיסט שהיה איכשהו בסדר, לקחו אותו לשם.
כן.
אני צריך לבדוק את זה עם אח שלי.
כן, בבקשה.
You need to hear, I would really encourage all of us, all of you, to hear something somebody let me hear yesterday, which is a recording of Ehud Barak telling the story of how he was doing his master's in Stanford, and that war that you're talking about broke, and he was called to, of course, he was the ex-commander of Sayeret Matkal, and he was called to New York to fly in, but the minute he got there, they told him that he needs to sort the list because there's only 170 seats on that plane, and there were 1,000 people that came quickly to the airport to try and fly to Israel. And he quickly developed a criteria to determine who he needs to go there. It's different criteria than the one that you had now, by the way, but obviously all command-based criteria. And that he realized that each and every one of them went there because what they felt obliged to do was to protect the home. Not the physical home, the roof, but the understanding that we have one home, that we have to defend each other. And that he has to live with the idea that he was the one who made the decision who will go, which basically meant that he probably made the decision of 2/3 of the people that went back home in a coffin from that group. An amazing storytelling. It appears in his book, but I think you will like it because it puts in perspective the other angle of being away and coming to this war and why the hell fight it. Yeah. I was also an insurance agent. It didn't take me that long as you did, and to be as successful as you were, to figure out that that's not something that I want to do, that I want to engage with people. So I fully understand what you're saying and the sentiment of connecting in this way to people. I'm curious, what are your, now in your case, it would be inappropriate to say it, but what's your sales point? When you sell the organization, what are you selling? What are you promoting? What are you offering? What are you telling them that this is something that you know for a fact they don't want to miss in their life?
Yeah, so this is a really difficult point that people have a hard time making the transition from, because we're all used to selling and marketing and talking features and benefits. Vistage is different. It really can't be sold. It needs to be experienced. They need to have a commitment to it. The members will create their own value. If people are sold and not convinced, they will come into the meetings, they will sit back, and they will look for other people to provide the value and to entertain them. What you want are people, I think, who have some evidence of personal growth, that they're on a journey of some sort, that they want to come in, that they're looking for a place where they can be vulnerable. The isolation at the top is extreme. The isolation enhances and magnifies stress. I say that 50% of the problem, of the resolution of the problem, is that a CEO will come in and say and admit to a group of peers, I have a problem that I can't solve. And one of the biggest issues that chairs face is how to get members to talk about problems. Think about it. They come to an organization to share, and then they walk in and say, I have no problems. That's because our self-image is they're fixers. We take care of things. We don't whine. We don't ask for help. We don't complain. Oftentimes, expressing an issue sounds like whining or complaining, and that's not who they are. So a big part of it, I've extended sign-ins where people talk about what's going on, and I'm closely attuned to their problems because they will give you cues. Then I don't present it as an issue. If you asked, oh, do you want to present that as an issue? They may not want to be subject to that 45-minute process. I say, is there something you'd like to talk about a little bit more than what you've said, right? So you need to be keenly attuned. So in terms of, again, every experience with them needs to be an experience of a peer where you are listening closely. The key thing is when you can repeat back to them. One of the things my mentor taught in the insurance business is whenever you're selling and there's an objection, repeat the objection for 3 reasons. And the reasons are that make sure that what the client said works, that you heard, that what they said is what you heard. It's the same thing. Second thing, it will buy you time. The third reason is sometimes the client will say something so stupid that when you repeat it back to them, you give them an opportunity to gracefully say, I didn't mean that. I employ that now, understanding that, because everybody's instinct is, oh, I know, I got it, right? Speed, quickness. We're usually rewarded for being the fastest, the quickest, the one who understands the most, so we want to jump in. It's counterintuitive. The more we listen, the more we hear, the more we ask questions, the more they understand that they are truly listened to in a very profound way. It's a unique experience in their life. When you take notes and repeat back to them, this is what I heard you say. Is this important? Their physiology changes. Their nervous system goes from fight or flight more into social engagement. And the experience of truly being heard and truly being listened to is so profound that they become attached.
And Gotti, from what I've seen over the years,
Thank you.
when looking, great question. When I have seen over the years that potential members to a group are looked at from 2 different perspectives. 1, are they wanting to learn? And 2, are they willing to share some of their own wisdom? Am I correct? It's not just giving one way. It has to go both ways.
Yeah, it's willing to share their own vulnerabilities and their own pain is more important. And sometimes it takes them a while in the group. And the chair has to set the example of vulnerability and processing and being vulnerable and open. Because they will they will be as vulnerable as you are.
What do you mean by that? How do you do that?
I shared with my members everything I was going through. At a certain point, I stopped sharing, but I would model it, leadership by example, like Amnon showed me on the battlefield in life. Be that person.
Yeah. Arnon and then Mark. Arnon, do you have a question for Gotti?
Yeah, hi Gotti. First of all, I apologize for having my video off of driving in the car. This was an incredible story. Thank you for sharing. And my question is maybe not even a question, it's an ask or a request going forward. I understand what you said about the difference between, it's not an interview for members where we promise them that we'll give them something. It's more of you have to understand you're going to be part of an experience and you're an equal partner in making this group useful and helpful. Otherwise, what's the point? And my only ask going forward is once we start that process of setting up our groups and interviewing people, if we could reach out and get your feedback almost online in that process, that would be extremely helpful, because it sounds like you have great experience in making sure you identify the right members.
So Arnon, if you could just repeat the last part, the specific part of the question, your audio is a little shaky.
Yeah, my request was just to keep this channel open going forward if possible. Once we start the process of setting up the groups, if we can get your pointers and feedback then as we're going through that process of really interviewing and talking to people to join our groups.
Sure. So I'm a guest of Boaz in India, and that's directed towards them, and I'd be happy to talk to them.
Absolutely. And we'd love to have you back, Gadi, once we start, forming groups after Chair Academy. And is it okay with you, Gadi, if I share your email address if someone has a question or something after we get through? Is that okay between now and the next few months?
Sure. And then perhaps you and I talk afterwards. If you want to do something a little more formal that would take some more time, I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Okay, absolutely. And Mark, and then Saul. Mark, you have a question for Gadi?
Sure, thank you. Hi, Gadi. And
Hi.
Gadi, Amir, I am the third insurance salesman on the call. It's impossible that those are statistics.
Such profound training, Mark.
That's amazing. In fact, I did a disability case last month in Los Angeles, so I'm still out of my mind. Great story, Gadi. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you. I appreciate your honesty and your insight. I think, and I appreciate, a little bit of that, that's really insurance training with you. I have these benefits, and don't you want to know what they are, as well as, instead of being sold, my mentor in insurance business once said, in any transaction, somebody is selling and somebody is being sold to. Which do you want to be, right? And I prefer to be the one selling. But I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but the businesses I have run, while they amount to, let's say, they qualify with respect to the statistics to be a chair, such as the amount of employees, the amount of revenue, years in business, et cetera. I meet all those criteria. That's not a problem. But my business has been very small. What is your feedback or insight with respect to meeting with a potential chair, a potential member, CEO, CFO, whatever, that is owns or is working in or part of a partner of a much larger organization? Of say, my own organization right now is quite small.
Sure.
But so I'm meeting with Mr. CEO, whatever, and his business is 10 times the size of mine. How do I relate to that person to say, I have no problem being confident, but how do you relate to that when they say, well, I have 500 employees and you have 5? How can you help me? So what kind of feedback do you have on that?
So I have a great question. So that's great, two great questions. So let me relate to the first thing you said, which is there are 3 insurance salesmen here on this group. So what I would say, when I went to training, I was in a cohort of 6 people. And there were some people who were very prominent, had been CEOs, like what you're describing, of large companies, well-known. And I looked at those people and I said, well, they're going to succeed for sure. Right. And there was this one guy in Atlanta that all he talked about, he was an ex-colonel in the US Army, and all he talked about was his database and his database as prospects. Well, out of those 6 people, two of them made it. That was myself from the insurance business, and this guy, all he talked about was his database and the number of people he had. So I think it bodes well that you're insurance people, because you are used to taking rejection. You're used to overcoming objections. You need a mind shift from selling. That's what I really experienced, a mind shift from selling to selection. And that takes time over time. So that bodes well that you have that. Now, to your second question I was in your exact same situation, because when I had my wholesale jewelry company, it was it was myself, my wife, and maybe one or two other people. And we probably never sold more than $1 million a year in the US. And I'm coaching people who had, I remember was a PhD in electrical engineering from Iran. And he worked, he had $1 billion history in terms of divisions of major corporations that he ran. And so I think the first thing is to focus on your strengths, right? And the second thing I would say is you focus on the person, not on the role, because at the end of the day, what walks into the room in the meeting are people. And there have been groups where, like, I'll give you an example. That guy that I selected, that I had qualms because the criteria was 5 million. His company was 3.8 million. And I kind of, well, maybe it's not really, I'm kind of sneaking him into the group. Well, it turned out that he was the guy that, because of his history and because of his personality, like, that's, people who ran 20 and 30 and $40 million companies looked up to him. So I know that we all start with this mindset. So I think a good exercise for you would be identifying your top 3 strengths and just talk about those, number one. Then talk about the other people in the group that might be peers with that person. Because at the end of the day, it's not about us. One of the biggest things I learned about Cher is how to step out of the room, to overcome that temptation to be the smartest guy in the room, and to really give it up and facilitate and make sure that everybody talks. And then people say, wow, what a great group of people you have brought together. This is amazing. Does that help, Mark?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Gadi. That's great. Thank you. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank
Saul and then Shimshon. Saul, a question for Gadi?
No, I asked a question before, but I apologize for coming late and missing most of what you said. I'll get it on the recording.
Yeah,
And then
you will, absolutely.
I'll follow up then with a question.
All right. Shimshon, do you have a question for Gadi?
Hello, yes. Hi, Gadi.
Hi,
Thank you very much. So number one, I need to apologize. Also, I came a few minutes late. Also have a little insurance background. Got out of it fast too, thank God. Before I ask some questions, I just wanted to go out of line a little bit and hopefully not embarrass Amir. I just want to tell everyone, I took the time to watch Amir Kfir's YouTube TED's Talk, and I got to tell you something. I feel very fortunate to be part of the group with, if everyone in this group is like Amir, I believe guys like Amir are a tremendous value add to humanity. And Toda Rabbi, Amir, you inspired me. And I think it was it's an amazing thing that you're doing. And I really encourage everyone to watch it and learn from it. It's just wonderful.
Thank you. Can I have that in writing for my wife?
And Shimshon, I will second the motion because that was my introduction to Amir several months ago. I watched his TED Talk and was very impressed.
Okay.
I second the
Got
motion.
Thank you.
So Gadi, and so first of all, is Vistage only open to CEOs or COOs? Could it be open to some people who are maybe want to learn how to preserve their wealth, wealthy individuals, people who have already made their money, retired, maybe just guys who want to learn how to do the right thing with their wealth? Does it have to be only CEOs or people who own companies? Are we limited to those people? And also, are we limited to geographically, people within our geographics, or especially now, especially today with Zoom? I know personally, I'm opening up a lot of doors in the UAE right now with a lot of business people there. Is that a possibility? Should we be looking? Can we be talking to some of our friends in the UAE to join our one of our groups?
Okay, so great questions. So the first thing, I think what you experience now is what you want to create for your members. What's the first thing that Shimshon said about Amir? He said, like, we have a real star. Find a star for your group. Find the first couple of people that are really super, super people. And then
I already put claims on Amir. I put claims on Amir.
There you go. But the point is, what you just experienced is what you want your members to experience. Wow, I'm part of this group. Because what I've discovered really over time, when you really probe deep, into people, they have like 2 or 3 core wounds, like I'm not good enough, I don't belong, or I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy in some way. So the ability to belong and to be heard, that at the end of the day, it's more powerful than anything else. And that's what you experience here. While I'm part of a group where somebody like that I'm part of, I'm surprised they let me into the group, right? So that's kind of the feeling that that you want to create. To your second question, so the Vistage model is devised for CEOs. There are also groups for key executives and for trusted advisors. But the key role is for the CEO, who is the decision maker. So that is the Vistage model. And you want to have people in there who are having the same challenges. Would it be beneficial to have somebody who may have just retired that wants to participate and is looked up to and respected? Perhaps, I don't know, but that Boaz can speak to that model. And then UAE as well. I think, yes, I think Zoom has made people way more willing to virtual. The world is our oyster. We're now doing hybrid meetings between in-person, and there's a lot of discussion, hybrid, in-person, but the world has opened up. So I would certainly, UAE, stuff like that, I would certainly take advantage of that. But I think from a Vistage perspective, I think to answer your core question, that's the experience, that's the model. Beyond the model, I mean, that's a separate issue.
Yeah, and to follow up on what Gary is saying here, that Shimshon, geographically, once everybody's back in person, it is very helpful for people to be able to get together in their city. And so if you have people far away, they may lose part of that experience. What do you think, Gadi, when we're back together, we're actually coming together each month?
Yeah, so we're all learning now, right? Because the world has changed. A key element of the success of the group and the long-term retention is their bonding and connection with each other off-site. So you want to encourage them to meet for lunch. You want to encourage them, you have retreats where the wives come together. You get the wives to be supporters, and then if they want to leave, then they got to answer to their wife. If the wives connect with the other wives, that's also a thing. So it's really important, I think, to do the bonding and to encourage people to connect. It's a bigger challenge now in the time of Zoom. So part of I have told my story in my talk, and I have done it for many of my members' executive teams to help them deal with that problem. When you can help the members go deeper, it bridges that digital gap, and people can develop an appreciation, a bonding, camaraderie, a love, a sense of connection with each other. It needs to be worked at, and we're creating it as it happens. But that bonding and that connection is really, really important.
Yeah, it really is. And what Gadi is saying, I know he does in his groups, and many other chairs do it, where they make sure each month, who are you going to have lunch with next month? And they make people commit to that. Okay, so I'll have lunch with Anita next month, and the following month I'll meet with Amir if I'm a member, connecting those people. And I've spoken to many Vistage retreats over the years, and oh my gosh, with the spouses, those are incredibly valuable bonding experiences. And Nurit has joined us, and you've got to understand, she has been moving. She's remodeling her whole house. They had to move to an apartment for 2 months. And so I'm just glad that she's joining us for whatever time that she has. And so Nurit, meet Gadi, and from what you've heard, any questions for Gadi? Such an inside track with him being born in Israel and being a chair in Houston.
Yeah, sorry for the delay. We really moved on Wednesday. It was a horrible few days, the last days, because of the rain, everything. So also the new apartment has been flooding. So many technicians and everything. So finally, tomorrow, I think, will be the first day that my original house is already broken, and the new apartment for the next 2-3 months, we can settle down. So only today, I also had an internet line, and I didn't have an invitation in my calendar. It was on the email. That's why I didn't see the time. But you know, somebody asked in one of the WhatsApp group about an external board. When you have a small startup and you don't have a CFO, and the CEO would like to consult with people about recruiting a person If he doesn't have a CFO, which is doing control, which is controlling the budget and everything, how can he do it? And suddenly I realized, oh my God, it's 5:30. And this is exactly, I respond to her and I told her, you can use an external board. There are companies that are running things like this. Let me talk to you in private if you want to have more details. And that's how I realized that we have this call. So it was really a connection. And unfortunately, Gadi, I missed your speech. But
We'll have the recording for you, Nurit. We'll have the recording. Do you have any questions
Excellent.
specifically for Gadi at the moment about Vistage or about building groups? Do you have any question for him?
No, not at the moment. I will continue to listen and then probably I'll have more questions.
Excellent. Excellent. Anybody else have any other questions for Gadi today? Yes, please, James.
I'm leaving, guys. Thanks so much. It was nice to meet you. I have to train. I've got everything set up, so I'm just going to pass on to another Zoom. Very nice to meet you, Gadi. Thank you very much. I love vulnerability. I think that's key, knowing how to be vulnerable, and so getting vulnerability from the peers. And I think that takes a lot of courage. So really getting people to be courageous enough to share. It was very, very nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.
Take care, guys.
Thank
All the best.
you.
Bye.
Anyone else have any other questions for Gadi today? All right. Anita, didn't Gadi share some amazing thoughts today? I was especially
I have a
moved by the
proposal
faith.
for Gadi. Gadi,
Yes.
when we're doing the training in Israel, we don't know yet what the dates are. Why don't you come and join us? Your mother will be happy. We will be happy. Why don't you come and spend a few days in Israel?
Unfortunately, probably he needs to come today in order to spend 14 days at home.
No,
isolated.
Yes.
you're not in the right business. Stay with
Amir, what kind of doctor are you?
huh?
No. Amir, all you need to do is get hold of his mother's phone number and she'll take care of the rest.
All right.
Seriously, I think you're looking for a good excuse to come to Israel. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, family, we've got to give Gadi some credit for being with us today. We appreciate it immensely. Anita, didn't he share some wonderful ideas with us?
Absolutely. It was very interesting, the insights and the experience that Gadi brings to Vistage. And one of the things that really gave me an insight is that you have to listen to yourself when you go through 15 years or whatever in insurance, and then suddenly you have something that make you stop and think, I need to make a change. I need to do something different. This is something that really struck me, because I truly believe this is something I'm experiencing, that there are moments in life where you have to stop and just connect to who you are and go with what you feel and go with your guts. And I think Vistage will give an opportunity for so many chairs to connect with amazing people, and the fulfillment of helping others, being connected, it's priceless. So that was a very important insight.
Absolutely. Gadi, any final thoughts for our chair candidates as they're about to go into academy here in a few weeks and launching their groups? Any other thoughts?
Well, so one of the things I learned from my own coach was I end every meeting with what's your takeaway and what's your commitment, right? So it's not entertainment, and it's not just people listening to each other, but people interacting. In that vein, my coach taught me at the end of every coaching session, I always ask, what's the best thing that's come out of this for you? And it does two things. Number one, I always think it's something and it's always something else. So that question keeps me on the other person's side. What's going through their mind? What matters to them? What's value to them? That's important information. And that's what Boaz and Anita, if it's all right, if we just go around the room quickly, what's
Absolutely.
thing? Yeah.
Absolutely. So Anita, your number one takeaway from today, we call it the takeaway in Vistage. What is the number one thing? And then we'll go to James. Oh, James had to leave, but then Jackie.
I think what I said before is connecting to yourself, take the moment to really connect and make decisions to change and connect to your gut. Like when you need to make a change, that's something that was really important.
Yeah. Jackie and then Amir, number one takeaway from Gadi. Did Jackie have to go? Okay, here we go to Amir and then Arnon.
I really like the fact that you you coach them, you model to them the value through the process of asking the question. You actually create a microcosmos in that meeting that will give them a sense of what it's really all about. I think that's a great way, really not to be in a sales position, but at a service level that you are offering here.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, Mark and then Yagev, number one takeaway.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump off after this because I have another call. My takeaway is that, and there's always so much, but this reminds me, you know, even though this is a chair candidate call with a speaker, this group is, you know, we're starting to get to know each other. Obviously, we just met Gotti today, but the group is starting to get to know each other in a little bit of a way, in that this reminds me of Vistage meetings in the past. You know, that, I don't know, I spent 6 years in Vistage, whatever it was. So my biggest takeaway is that this is starting to feel like a Vistage group, although this is a, you know, a chair candidate group, but, you know, it's not like we solve problems or whatnot. So it's starting to feel like Vistage to me. And that's great because as I look on taking on another, yet another commitment in my life, which is insanity, I feel more comfortable because I say, okay, I know this, I like this, I can do this. I know what this looks, feels, and sounds like. So that my biggest takeaway was that. So that I'm quite grateful for because that really
Wonderful.
helps me right now. Anyway, and I'm going to drop off. Gotti, thank you. I'm going to go to the other call.
All right. Thank you, Mark. And
thank you
Gotti,
again,
Mark
Boaz.
was
I'll
a,
talk to you later.
thank you, Mark. And Mark was a Vistage member of California for a number of years before he moved back to Israel. Yagev, your number one takeaway today, Shimshon?
Well, actually, I have three, and it's difficult to rank them, so I'll mention all three of them. I really like the 6 invisible criteria that Gadi mentioned, and I also really appreciate this point about vulnerability and leadership. So I think all of those are great takeaways from my perspective. Thank you.
Wonderful. Shimshon and then Saul.
I have
Yeah.
to.
So first of all,
Sorry.
so
Shimshon
one of
and
my
then Saul.
the first takeaway was stay out of the insurance business, leave that to Mark. And the next one was that I appreciate sitting around the table with you chairs. I'd love to be one of the chairs around the Vistage table. I realize how valuable it is to helping other people, and you know, it's just reiterating what I've already thought about you guys.
Wonderful. Saul, number one takeaway, and then Nurit.
So I have to listen to the tape or recording, and I want to dig into the idea of vulnerability. I want to make sure I understand that. I'm curious about that. I'm sorry I missed it.
Absolutely. Nurit, from what you heard, what's a takeaway from the time you've been with us?
I missed most of the meeting, but when I heard from Amir, I think, the fact that Gadi was guiding, coaching, leading the team, and really give a service and not you know, a product or something. This is my motto in my career, is to be at the service of my customers, even if it's my team internally or even my customers externally. I give them a service, and I would like to be for them with my experience, with my knowledge, whenever and wherever they need me, you know. So so if Gadi, this is what he's bringing to the team, to his team and to his board, I think this is a great value to the people, to the CEOs and the managers. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Nurit. So Gadi, wouldn't you say that was a good round of takeaways?
Yes, and I think it demonstrates what you're starting to hear is the beginning of the bonding process, right? The people, and I appreciate these people. That's what you want to create.
Yeah. Gadi, we are so grateful for your time. You and I will talk about maybe other times you can come and be a guest with us in the future, but truly your connection with Israel, with us, with the military is very heartwarming, and we really appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure. All the best, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gadi.
Thank you.
Thank
Toda
you.
raba.
Yeah, please
Bye.
make note, our next meeting, our next chair meeting is coming up in 2 weeks on the 14th of December, 5 o'clock Israel time. And our guest will be Ed Burke. He is another master chair out of Dallas, Texas, where I live. And so you're going to be getting in the next week or so the revised agreements. We've listened to all of you. We've tried to interject points that can make everything work out. And so we will get those to you. We'll need to get those right back because that will determine us setting the date for Chair Academy once we get the agreements back. Any questions from anybody? Any questions? All right, we appreciate all of you greatly. We will be
Hello.
in touch and we look forward to seeing you all
Thank you.
soon.
Bye.
You all have a
Thank
good
you. Bye-bye.
day. Bye-bye.